Hey everybody, MrAyrit here. Welcome back to the channel. Got a quick amp review for you today, and this is one that I had been really wanting to get my hands on for a while. And I was just kind of waiting for a good deal to come along, and that's the MT604 by, what is it, Xduoo? I don't know how to say the name. Xduoo. So anyway, I'm just gonna call it the MT604. So it's really a nice little tube amp, to be perfectly honest with you. Now this is a hybrid tube amp, which basically means that you've got it's running it through tubes, but it's really the power is coming from like a solid state amplifier. At least that's my understanding of it. So what's interesting about this particular amp is it is a balanced and balanced only amplifier. So you can see on the front here, the I/O, we actually have two volume knobs. These are one for each channel. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. You've got a balanced out 4-pin, a balanced out 4.4, and then a balanced in 4.4. On the back, you've got just XLRs in, you've got on-off, and then you've got a 12-volt power. So you can see this thing is actually like quite small, to be honest with you. You know what? Let me grab a Magni for comparison here. Just a second. Okay, so here's a Magni for size comparison, and I wanted to do this for you because for me, I was kind of shocked at how small it was. Like in the pictures, it looks a little bit bigger, I thought, online, but no, it's actually a very small form factor, which I think is a good thing, is a bonus. Now the power cable, it's a pretty big power cable. You've got kind of like the standard like PC cable into the brick, and then so you got however much, about 4 feet of wire there, and then you get 4 more feet of wire to go to the amp. I personally always like it when they just put the transformers in the amps, and you can just run those PC cables right into them. But I mean, if they do that, you wouldn't be able to get this nice little form factor. So I get it. It's a trade-off, I suppose. So build quality, I think, is pretty good. I mean, it certainly feels on par with something like a Magni, for sure. The volume knobs, I would say, are better quality than that. And yeah, I mean, everything feels good, feels tight. This is the first of this brand, this first Xduoo, however you say it. This is the first product of theirs that I've had a chance to test out and review, and I'm pretty pleased with the quality of it. Now, when we're talking about like nitpicks here, these dual volume knobs, I guess I understand where you're coming from. It's like if you get an imbalance with tubes, you can tweak the sound a little bit, but honestly, I just find this to be more of a pain in the butt than anything else. The other piece of gear that I had that was kind of like this was the Cost Drop. Their electrostatic had a similar, except they were both on one kind of knob type of deal. But anyway, like it just makes it impractical to change volume on this device. So you're going to for sure want either a DAC that has a volume control on it, or you're going to want to use pre-outs of something like like a Magni or whatever. You'll want to use pre-outs from. And I just think that's a bummer, because that just limits like the amount of gear that you can use with it and stuff, because you're really not going to want to be turning 2 volume knobs to tweak it. So pretty much like I kind of had it set to where each volume knob was like basically in the middle, and then I would just tweak the sound with my DAC or with a preamp on something. The majority of the time I was using this, I was using it, Bifrost 2 was the source, but that was going into the Jotunheim 2, and then I had the XLR out, so the Jotunheim 2 going into this. That was my main use case, and then I used the Jotunheim volume knob to change the volume on this. So like I said, that's kind of a bummer, because if I wanted to hook this straight up to the Bifrost 2, I could, but it was so fiddly with getting, the volume set that just seemed impractical. The other thing that makes this a little more difficult to use is that it's XLR only. So You can get around this though with a cable like this one here, where you've got RCAs to male XLRs. So this is a cable from Seismic. I think they make generally pretty good quality cables. I think this was, I don't know, $16, $17, something like that. So I'll link to the description of this below, and this will let you use it with the preamps of something like a Magni, or coming straight out of a DAC that just has RCA single-ended instead of balanced. So yeah, overall build, good. Overall function, okay, as long as you've got some way to control the volume besides on this amplifier. So let's talk about sound. The sound, I think, is pretty good. I mean, I paid $125 for this one. Normally they're $175 is what they retail for, and I think at that price you're getting a pretty decent quality amplifier with just like a smidge of tube flavor. So I mainly just use the stock tubes. I did purchase those the cheap, I can't remember what tube this is, but I'll link to the tubes that I tried it with as well. So I did try some aftermarket tubes. I honestly thought it sounded worse with those in it. I thought it sounded much more sterile and clinical with those tubes. It's like, I think they're like the GE River Stone or something along those lines. Again, I'll link down the description of those. But I would say save your money. Don't buy those. Again, you got to buy 2 sets of them because you've got 4 tubes in this, right? So it ends up being about $35, $40 by the time you get taxes and shipping on it, and I just don't think that's worth it for this amplifier. And like I said, I thought it sounded worse too. So the general sound signature, I would say, is pretty clean. It's pretty flat, pretty balanced. You are getting a little bit of extra mid warmth and richness compared to something like the Jotunheim 2 or like a Magni Heresy. But you are sacrificing a little bit of detail, a little bit of separation between instruments and stuff. But that's not to say that it sounds bad. I thought there were many cases where I preferred running something through this as opposed to straight out of like a solid state source that was fairly analytical. So it does add a little bit of that tube richness, warmth. It's not anything crazy. I mean, the highs are still very present and well detailed. The bass is not overpowering by any means or overly done. It just, like I said, mainly in the mids is where I noticed it adding just a little bit of richness and maybe taking away a little bit of clarity. But all in all, it's a very nice sound. It's very well controlled. It sounded good on almost everything I tested it with, and that includes I had the 6XX, which I didn't like that much. I did that review last time. I had the Nighthawks on it. I had several different Hi-Fi Man headphones, the 560, the 400, the HE6S EV2, and the Edition XX. I tried all those through it, and I didn't think that it mismatched or didn't pair well with any of those. So I think it's a pretty versatile amp if you want to like try a little bit of tubiness. But again, this isn't, it doesn't add a crazy amount of coloration by any means. So but yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think the build's good. I think it sounds good. The only complaint I really have is just the dual volume knobs. I wish it was just one volume knob, and then also it'd probably be nice to have like a lower gain stage too, just in case, again, people don't have an external volume control for it. That just add a little more flexibility to it. So as long as you have a DAC or a preamp that you can control the volume with this, I think it's a good hybrid tube amp to try out. Originally I really liked the Cavalli Tube Hybrid. I haven't had that for a while now. It's been long enough that I couldn't really draw a comparison between the two. I would say this one, if I'm remembering correctly, which is very questionable, I would say this one is maybe just like a little bit richer with stock tubes, whereas the Cavalli Tube Hybrid was a little bit thinner and kind of punchier and tighter sounding. But again, take that with a grain of salt because it's been a little while since I've heard the Cavalli Tube Hybrid. I think either this or the Cavalli Tube Hybrid, I think both of those are good hybrid tube amps that you could try out if you're interested in testing those things out. Probably if you want a tube roll, the Cavalli Tube Hybrid would be better, or the Valley 2, just because then you can just buy one and they have a little more universal tubes as opposed to the MT604, which again, you have to buy 4 tubes, and I don't know that there's that many options out there for this particular tube format. So yeah, nice little amp. I'd be curious to try out some more of these Xduoo or Xduoo devices. I was pretty happy with this one, and I think they have a pretty good value proposition, it seems like, for most things. So yeah, questions, comments, alternative opinions, definitely drop those down below. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you watching, and consider subscribing if you want some more headphone content. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.